Welcome to the DraftKings Pick6 series with Josh and Nate. We are rolling along with some more sports-specific strategy here that we're looking at with the NFL in this video. Have another one up with the NBA, but we also have plenty for you if you are not yet super familiar with DraftKings Pick6. We have an understanding the basics sort of video, how to sign up and get everything that you need, and sort of the mechanics of this pretty awesome game, honestly, that's come around here in the DFS world. So definitely make sure to check those out. Subscribe to that page so you don't miss any of what we're bringing you, and check out the NBA one as well. I think we've got some really helpful tips for those of you looking to put some money down on DK Pick6. But we're going to get into the NFL right now. I will say we only have one game at our disposal. We're recording this on a Monday, so we're looking at the Texans and the Cowboys as our example. But let's jump into what we're going to be looking at here, Nate, and kick it off with the first item.
Yeah, and that's something to be aware of when you do have these one-game island slates. We talk about in the general strategy video. You can pick between 2 and 6 props here on Pick6, and honestly, like, you probably want to aim small on a small slate like this, because I mean, how many, unless you're going to feel like you can hit exactly who goes over, who goes under, it's like, how many overs are you going to get in one game? There's only so many snaps to go around, unless you have the Bengals and Ravens playing each other, which Josh had that example in there, and everything went over. But yeah, I mean, the biggest thing to remember with the NFL is this is such a small sample size. We talk about identifying value, fading kind of recent results in other sports based on the game log. I mean, you can almost just throw the game log out when it comes to the NFL. You want to dive deeper in terms of things like snap counts, average depth of target, potential targets, all those kind of advanced stats that show you where when a guy is due for more, due to regress positively. I won't even say towards the mean like we talk about with the NBA, because we just don't have a sample size to say what the mean is supposed to be. Right. It is so much about context, so much about that individual matchup, and what defense they're going against. And so you really have to narrow in on what is the situation this week, and who's going to be around them, where the team is at, where the betting line is at when you try to make these picks.
There's a lot, man. Yeah, and I think that's the key thing to remember with the NFL at the end of the day is going to be, it's so important what's going on around a player as much as it is how the player is performing. So for instance, the Seattle Seahawks, a lot of passes. You would imagine that means always a ton of points. But the Seattle Seahawks play at a very slow pace, right? They don't have very many plays per second. So at times, even though they're throwing the ball a good amount, they're also not running it. And they're not necessarily running up to snap the ball very quickly within the play clock. So that's just one example of what's happening outside of a player like DK Metcalf or Jackson Smith and Jigba is like, yes, they're playing well and I'd like to go over, but there's not enough snaps to even get me to a reasonable, number here to go over for them. So that's one thing to keep in mind. I'll add just more context to everything is the injury report. And obviously you could start here, but there's plenty of things to look at. So we'll get to them one at a time. With the injury report, one thing to bring up with the NFL once again is, I mean, look, in the NBA, to use the NBA as a comparative example, in the NBA, if one player is out off of, let's say, the New York Knicks, and it's, like OG Anunoby, well, that's not really going to impact Jalen Brunson's shot attempts. I can still bank on Jalen Brunson taking a ton of shot attempts with or without OG Anunoby. If I'm looking at CeeDee Lamb, for instance, and I'm saying, well, I'd really like to go over on his receptions here. Well, I don't know if Cooper Rush is going to have time to get the ball out against the fourth best press percentage team in the league with the Houston Texans, against an offensive line that has been struggling mightily, especially since Cooper Rush got in there. We saw what happened with him against the Eagles. So I don't know if I can comfortably take any overs on CeeDee Lamb if I can't trust the offensive line to protect the quarterback to get the ball to him, right? So there's a lot more context with injuries in the NFL than I think any other sport, because of how dependent you are on the people around you to be successful just as much as you are successful.
Yeah, although Will Anderson out for the Texans, so there's always it's always who's around you on your team and the other team when you think about the whole picture. In the context of Pick6, though, like, you really have to learn to like read through the tea leaves in these injury reports, right? Wednesday through Friday is the way the NFL does injury reports for standard games, for Sunday games, right? And if you get a DNP Wednesday, Thursday, that might indicate something, but it's the Friday is the almighty decider, right? And this is so important because Pick6 will leave these lines up all week, and they're not going to move So if you think you have an edge because of how you've read the reporting, you've looked at the injury report, and you think, oh man, like the Jaguars are going to be down 3 offensive linemen, I'm going to hammer this under on Travis Etienne. Like, I don't care that Bigsby is out as well. They're not going to be able to run the ball. So I mean,
Yeah.
that is a huge way to kind of get an edge early on props and on pick six in this situation. And then of course it comes down to the matchup, right? I mean,
Yeah.
what does the defense do? What do they allow? What do they try to funnel? We talk about pass funnels all the time. The Minnesota Vikings, the Baltimore Ravens, just their identity is we're not gonna let you run the ball. And so I mean, they might have pretty talented corners, but those corners are put under so much stress because they're playing heavy boxes that they give up bulk yardage. So you can take a guy like George Pickens last week, who really had to work for it, but certainly got over all his props because that was the only way the Steelers were going to move the ball against that Ravens team. So, I mean, that's one way to look at it, is in a pretty simple way, is what do they give up? What do they not give up? And I mean, there's far more you can dive into it in terms of like zone rate and how much man they play, how much press coverage, and where they allow completions to in the middle of the field, not just the position, but there's a lot of data you can use to just try to identify the best matchups.
Totally. Depending on how deep you want to get into it, sometimes it's as simple as at least knowing what the total is on the game. What's the over under for the total amount of points supposed to be? Well, if it's a game like the Ravens and the Bengals, excuse me, not the Steelers, but the Bengals rather. Now we know we've got 2 fast-paced teams. They can't stop what the other one likes to do. The total is up at 53.5 points. Be careful betting under on many people's yards or anything of that nature. So understanding that's important. I mean, one level sort of deeper than that would be projecting what the game script is going to be. And I at least touched on this a little bit with a team that is going to run a lot of time off of the play clock, meaning there's going to be fewer possessions for each team on offense because they're moving slowly when they have the ball on offense. Well, that's going to dictate the game script, which also involves, is a team winning or losing, right? In the NFL, you can run the clock way more than you can in a game like the NBA, where you have 24 seconds to shoot before you're guaranteed to have the ball, touch the rim, or at least be out of your hands and in a good position for the other team to move down the field, the court the other way. In the NFL, I can run I could basically run a 10-minute drive if I play my cards right here. If I get like a first down, just chewing away at 3-4 yards at a time, then I'm going to be able to do that. So that's a huge part of the game script of the strategy here is one team expected to blow out another? That can be as simple as starting with, what's the spread of this game? Well, it's a 12.5-point spread. The Lions are probably going to beat the snot out of the Jaguars, for instance, as what happened in week 11. That was pretty predictable. A lot of guys still got over, I will say, but some guys probably suffered as a result of their not needing to move the ball after a certain point in the game.
Nobody on the Lions did, because that's part of the extenuating context, is
Right.
knowing the coaches and the situation. I don't know if we expected it to that degree, but Dan Campbell
Right.
does not care
True.
he does not feel sorry for anybody. So yeah,
Right.
he made sure everybody on his offense was going nuts. Apparently, there might have been some hope to rebolster Jared Goff's MVP campaign. More context to consider there by letting him sling the ball all day. And just kind of like building on the momentum of their comeback win after he throws 5 picks. They come back to beat the Texans and just say, like, look, we're going to keep this thing rolling. So, I mean, I love game script for sure. That is probably my starting point after, going through all the stuff we talked about before in terms of just trying to paint a picture of how the game's going to go and to feel most confident about props in that way, to say this running back is going to go under because they're just going to be down. They're going to be down immediately. They're going to have to abandon the run, vice versa. I like receivers to go over. But maybe I only like the receptions because I think this defense is good enough to still do well with prevent. And that type of player is going to catch more underneath targets. NFL, rest versus division games versus coaches being fired. There's always something huge to think about going from week to week. Letdown spots after a win, comebacks after a loss. These things ebb and flow, and there are bigger trends to think about. we opened this with talking about the smallest sample size when it comes to individual player performances, but there's a large sample size of NFL trends to go off, right? In terms of division dogs and how they perform. And so that can be kind of a way to paint that game script in your mind. Is to be like, nah, Kyler Murray, he's probably covering this 7 against the 49ers. The 49ers have not gotten it all together. Therefore, I'm going to forecast a closer game. I'm going to stick with James Conner despite whatever, because I think the game script will be positive enough that they will stick with him. And so that's another way to kind of paint the game script for you.
Yeah, and you'll see that the game script baked into some of these lines as well. Like some of these lines, maybe you'll see fewer rushing yards than you expect for a running back who normally does pretty well, but his team is expected to be losing for a lot of this game. So they're going to be throwing the ball more. The books will take that into account at times, or the market will take into account and move the line to where it should be. One or the other is going to happen when game script is so heavily involved in the NFL, as you mentioned. So plenty to consider here. Last thing I would say is we talked about so much, and there's so much more than we even mentioned that goes into betting on the NFL. Have a conversation with a friend. Have someone that you talk about this with, and then get two brains on it, because Nate and I are doing that whenever we talk about our picks. Having two eyes and sort of angles that we can see for each play is super helpful, and have someone sort of be your devil's advocate so that you can know what's wrong or potentially wrong with a bet that you want to make. But that's all the time we have for the NFL strategy one. Hope you guys are getting something out of these, because we are definitely having a good time putting them together. We'll be back, I'm sure, with a few more of these strategy videos for you guys in the Pick 6 series. But until we see you next, happy betting.